we're going to be looking at is bank reconciliation for Infor SunSystems. This is a dedicated module that's been designed to enhance and improve the way that people are able to carry out bank reconciliation for SunSystems ledger accounts against bank accounts and statements they have sitting at their bank. There are a number of different tools available within the SunSystems space for dealing with bank reconciliation. However, this is the most focused tool in that the functionality is designed to work purely for reconciliation. Okay, I think we'll probably start now based on the time, but hopefully if anybody joins later, then we should be able to catch up as we go along. So thank you very much for attending this afternoon. The session today is actually based on the bank reconciliation module for Infor SunSystems, and this is a focus tool that's been designed specifically to work with SunSystems and to allow for automation of matching bank statements against ledger bank detail held within SunSystems. And it's a tool that is only working for statements. So there are a number of ways of running reconciliation in the SunSystems space, particularly Rec Manager within SunSystems, or maybe even doing this through extracts from Sun and then matching against statements within a spreadsheet. But the great thing about the bank reconciliation module is it actually provides a way of doing a focused bank rec with specific functionality designed to work well with statement reconciliation. So if we look at some of the features of bank rec, the system is designed to work only with Sun, and it is part of a set of modules from Professional Advantage, who are a long-term development partner of Infor and of SunSystems in particular. And the Cash Desk suite composes of tools that work for payment management in the B4B system, debtor management with Collect, and also e-remit for sending remittances out. However, BankRec forms that final part of the cash management suite. It's the management of the cash in and out of the bank and making sure that that all occurs on a day-to-day basis. So the system itself is a tool that actually works in a number of different ways. But first of all, it provides a complete method for maintaining your current bank position. And that means that we're able to import bank statements into the system. We're able to then match transactions on the bank statement against transactions that sit within the SunSystems ledger in the designated cash book accounts, and then move on to doing matching of an automated basis, which could use flexible and quite powerful rules to allow you to match things at high volume very quickly, and then move on obviously to tracking of that and reporting of that in the background. It's a one-stop shop, so within the one module you have visibility of all the statement data, visibility of the transactional data, and all the reporting functionality. So you don't need to jump in and out of SunSystems in order to deal with anything you need to do, including things such as the ability to post transactions directly from the statement into the SunSystems ledger rather than having to jump out and post them in Sun in order to then reconcile them in the BankRec module. So it is a very good and powerful addition to the way that you manage those statements and the ledger reconciliation. And it's particularly good for organizations that have many different bank accounts, many different ledgers, and need a way of centralizing the way they understand those ledgers and the management of the statement uploads in particular, which can be quite laborious if you've got lots of different ledgers and you're doing it in a different way. So the system has one primary function, and that is that you don't have to map the statements that you download from your banking solution to get them into the system. It actually supports multiple different statement formats, and we understand the generic format that is provided by the bank system. So for an example, if you bank with, say, Barclays and use Barclays Business for internet banking, you will be able to download a statement in a format that they use for their statements. And with BankRec, we would support that format and allow you to upload the statement into the system without having to do any manipulation of the file, any mapping to make it into a journal file or anything like that. And once we upload that into the system, it's then visible as a statement. So rather than looking at a set of journal data or representation of the statement data, we're actually showing it as a statement with the statement fields and in a way that reflects the paper statement that you would have downloaded. And we currently support roughly 300 different bank statement formats across multiple banks globally, and we can also produce extra formats as needed if if we find a bank that we haven't dealt with before, or indeed if banks change their formats, such as Lloyds is doing currently. We're always supporting those changes to the formats as well. One of the big benefits is that we can upload multiple accounts into the system simultaneously. So if you download a statement from the bank and that statement file contains more than one account, when we upload that file into BankRec, it is able to break the accounts up from the one file upload and place the relevant statement data into the right area of BankRec and link it to the correct bank accounts. So you don't have to have one statement for every single account. When you do an upload, you can upload them all from one statement if the bank provides a download in that format. Additionally, we can also present multiple statement files in one upload. So if you do have 20 bank accounts and 20 separate files that you've downloaded from the banking system, we can add those into the upload list and it will upload them all at once and break the data into correct areas. So we can deal with single accounts, multiple files, or multiple accounts in the one file. And that's very good for centralizing your process. You can have one person do all the downloads, upload them in one spot, and then individuals across the organization, if you've got a lot of accounts with different entities and different business units, could all go and log into bank reconciliation and get on with the rec in the accounts that they're responsible for. The system does provide very high percentages of automatic matching based on the flexibility of the matching rules that we can provide, and that uses wildcards to enable us to identify transactions in the statement that maybe have some form of commonality in the referencing or the descriptions or the types, etc., and then go and run a matching routine against the ledger transactions that may or may not match that, and indeed use things such as character stringing, where we can say that the first two characters in one side matches the second two characters in the other side, that sort of thing. So those rules are proven to be quite flexible. We tend to find about 70% auto matching, which is pretty good. Obviously, there are always going to be some things that are very hard to do that for, and the manual matching functionality provides an ability to do that. With the journal posting function, we're able to deal with things such as bank charges that may be coming on the bank account and you aren't aware of until you get the statement. Could also even deal with things such as receipts. So if you have a receipt coming in that needs to be posted into Sun and recognised against the bank account, but also pushed into some other account to recognise the fact it is a receipt, we are able to post the journal from the statement by right-clicking and choosing either a preset or a journal field where we can fill in the details needed before doing that posting. So it gives you quite strong flexibility in the background to manage these things. The system obviously gives you a very accurate reconciliation, and this is because it is system-based. So when we are actually linking a transaction in the statement side with a transaction in Sun, be that one we've posted or one we've matched against, it actually holds a system link in the background so we can go back and look at the statements and see what has been matched within the system. And if we wanted to, we can drill down on any matched lines and see the history there. We can see which transaction in Sun has been matched to, what the journal number was, what the journal line number was, all of those important details. So it gives you a strong audit report and a strong way of reporting on BankRec, which is generally better than that you would use from a sort of an Excel type bank reconciliation, where it's only as good as the data sitting in the file. It also has a real-time ledger integration in terms of the ability to report on a sort of more standard BankRec position. So if you wanted to see calculated differences, the count bank balances, the ledger cash book balances, etc., all of those things are returned directly within the reporting structure. So if we look at the functionality, you can import or create statements manually. Most of the time we wouldn't be importing the statement manually. We were doing it by taking a file and uploading it. We can support all of the different bank accounts. We can automate the matching. We can reconcile multiple SunSystems ledger accounts. And we can even do things such as splitting transactions within the SunSystems ledger. So maybe where you've had a part payment or something like that, where you need to match an element of the statement against half or a proportion of a transaction in Sun, we can do that and split the transaction directly from within the BankRec system. So in all, this system gives us something that most organizations find as being much more useful than using Reconciliation Manager in Sun or indeed a manual BankRec, and it saves a lot of time, and generally means you can close your bank rec on a much more regular basis. So people tend to be moving from monthly bank recs or weekly bank recs, even down to daily bank recs, because of the sort of functionality that you're being presented with here. So the system, very well utilized, lots of referenceability in the SunSystems space. Just a few comments here, but predominantly the comments that people have coming back from the system is that it's accurate, it's quick, it's easy to understand things, and the fact that they don't have to map the statement in the background.
Need about another 30 more.
So if I now move on away from these slides, I'd like to show you the system and just show you some of the functionality and how we can do things within here. I'm going to escape from the slides, minimize this for a minute, and we're going to go and log into bank reconciliation. And the tool can be installed either on the desktop, so individual users who may need access to the system can have it installed for them, and it will talk to the SunSystems server, or it could be installed on a server and deployed to a user through Citrix or Terminal Server if needed. And indeed, there is also a web client for the system. So if you wanted to have exactly the same functionality but available through IE, that can be provided as well as a different part of the installation. The security for BankRec is based on SunSystems security. So when you log in, it actually utilizes a SunSystems user ID to access the system, and it picks up the passwords and security from the SunSystems security service. And when you log in, it doesn't use a SunSystems user license count. So you can still have your full number of users accessing SunSystems when you access BankRec. You don't need to license in a similar fashion. So you can have any number of users concurrently in BankRec licensed at that level, and then you still have your full SunSystems user count. So I'm going to log in here as a user called PAS, and this will take me into the bank reconciliation environment that I have set up. And if we look at this, what you can see is there are two main areas on the screen. Firstly, you've got the area on the left-hand side where you can decide whether or not you're going to be going and doing new matching against statements, or indeed viewing statement history. So by clicking these buttons here, the options drop up and down the screen. And then in the middle of the screen, we've got our work area, where it will bring up statement data and ledger data as we move through the functionality. Now, the first thing we're likely to be doing in a day is importing a new statement into the system. And this means that we should already have bank accounts set up for those statements that we're downloading and attempting to upload. So to set up a new bank account, we have access to the maintenance area at the top of the screen. And if I'm a user who has the relevant permission, I'm able to go into the bank account setup area. And within this area, we can define as many accounts as you like. And what we're doing is we're linking the data between the ledger account in Sun and the bank account number that will appear on the statement. And we're giving that a name, and we're defining which bank that's coming from a format sense. So if we look at this here, I've got a number set up here. This one has a bank account at the bank. That is the actual bank account number. We're giving it a name, which is main account 1 in my case, but this name can be anything you want to know the account as. It doesn't have to be the actual account name or anything like that. In this case, I'm linking it to my Citibank download format. So I've got a CBS Citibank format here. But indeed, for you, whatever account format was required, whichever bank was required, we would install the correct format so they will be available to you. I'm then going to link this account number to a SunSystems database or business unit. So if I hit the drop down, this gives us a complete list of all the business units that exist within SunSystems. This is a real-time integration. So if you added a new business unit, it will become available to you in this area. So I can say, okay, I'm choosing PKP as my business unit, and then over on the right-hand side, I've linked this to my ledger bank account that is the related bank account for this actual bank account number. So I've chosen to add 52200 as my bank account, but I could have chosen from any of the account list within SunSystems to link this together. What I can also do here is, if needed, I can add multiple ledger accounts. So if you wanted to link this particular bank account to multiple ledger accounts, so it would try reconciling against both accounts, that is feasible as well within the system, and we can decide which one is the primary system in the background. Once I've defined this, obviously I could do things such as saying what currency I want to be matching, and if I'm looking at the base amount or the transaction amount in the Sun ledger, that really is the main configuration for the system. So I can set up as many of these as I wish, and once that's done, the record is then available for use for uploading statements against. In reality, when we implement BankRec, the first thing we're going to be doing is setting up an opening balance statement. So we define a statement which holds any unreconciled transactions prior to the day that you're going to go live with the system, so that they're available within here to then match against anything that comes through on the statement. So we do have, as an implementation, a process we have to go through, obviously, to implement, and we need to work to as clean a BankRec as possible historically. But those things are sort of implementation-based discussions which we would obviously talk about with any client who's interested in the system. So my daily process would now be that I've downloaded my statement from the bank. So whatever the banking system is, I go in and download a file or multiple files and put that somewhere on the network where I'm able to access them from BankRec. So I could then go into the file import statement function, and this would allow me to choose the file that I wish to upload. So in my case, I'm saying I'm uploading a Citibank file. I can then go and add files, and this will allow me to browse to wherever I put this statement. And I've got a statement here that's a sample statement, which is a Citibank statement. So if I go OK, this file could contain multiple accounts, or it could contain one account, doesn't matter. And I could also add more files. So you can upload as many files from this file upload function as you wish. When I'm ready to go, I can choose to confirm the accounts that are in the statement prior to the upload. So maybe I want to make a selection of accounts and maybe choose which ones I wish to upload, and we can do that. And I can also run the automatic matching function during the import. But in reality, most people actually upload the statement first, have a look at it potentially, and then go and run the automatic matching functionality. But it is entirely an optional element for you. So I'm going to import this. For me, it's now coming up and showing I have one account in the statement, which is account 888888. It's showing me the date, the beginning date of the statement, the end date of the statement, and the opening and closing balance in the file. If I wanted to ignore this account, if I had a multiple list, I could choose to untick the process option, which would mean that it wouldn't be imported when I say OK. But in this case, it is my only account, so I'm going to import it into the system. So I go import, and what this is now telling me is that I actually have a statement date overlap. So the system actually has a number of checks and balances to ensure that you don't import statements that you've already imported and produce duplicate data, that sort of thing. So one of those balances is that it will look for overlaps in the statement date range that you're importing. The reason I'm getting this error is that I've actually used this demonstration statement a number of times. So it is actually going to import some duplicate data. But for the reality of a day-to-day process, you would normally expect the date ranges to be flowing into each other. So this would be a valid warning to ensure that you're not going to do something that you didn't want to do within the system. So I'm going to say, yes, that's fine, import it, and it's now taken all that data and brought it into the system ready for me to work with. And that could be for one account or for multiple accounts. So the next step would be to go and actually have a look at that statement and maybe do some matching against it, or indeed go and have a look at the statements that are already in the system. And I'm going to do that. So if we go across to the left and have a look at view statements, I'm already sitting in the PKP business unit, although I could go and jump between different business units in Sun based on wherever the accounts were that I wanted to reconcile. For me, they are within PKP, so that's fine. I can then go view statements by account number, and this will give me a breakdown of all the accounts that I have set up within the system within the PKP business unit. So for me, you can see here that we've actually got a number of different accounts set up, and if I expand on the little plus button, we will see all of the statement pages that have been historically imported for those accounts. So this one here, we've got one statement page, this one, two statement pages, three, and many more. This one here, you can see I'm using that demo data. So the statement pages are repeat pages that I've been importing, but in the normal sense, you would expect to see the dates running into each other as you go forward through the weeks. But these are individual statements, so they represent the statements that you've been importing over time. So I click on this one, it will show me data from that statement. If I click on the next one, it will show me data from the next statement, etc. as we go through. So each of these is actually a set of statement data that is represented as the fields you would expect on a statement. So if we examine this page, you can see it's for a certain account. We had a statement date range, 1 day. It would show you the number of days in the statement pages. We've got the fact that it has an opening balance and a closing balance. And then if we move down to the grid, what we see is the data that you would normally expect on the paper statement. So we can see a transaction date, a transaction type, so that could indicate things like check or direct debit or any other types that the bank deals with in the way it provides the statement data. We have a description field, we have a reference field, and we also have a value date and a credit and debit. So it's showing us that sort of data in a way that you would understand it if you were looking at a statement. So if I just move this field over here, because I'll come back to that in a second. The grid is actually quite a flexible grid. So within here we can sort up and down by any of the fields just by clicking on the top header of the field. We're also able to sort on a more sort of custom basis based on everything in the column, or using a custom sort function where we can say it's like or equals to or less than, that sort of thing, and we can have multiple filters there, and indeed use wildcards in relation to that filter to find something where maybe it just had BAC in it or something like that. So those filters are quite useful. But what we can also do is group the data and move the columns around to make it more representative of what a user actually would like to see. So if I wanted to group everything by reference, I can drag that up into the grey area until the green arrow appears, let go, and I then get everything grouped by reference within here. So if I've got multiple of one reference, they will appear as multiples within the system. And it's rather like a pivot table in Excel, so I could continue and do it by maybe transaction type and reference. So now I'm getting transaction type X grouped by reference X, that sort of thing. So this makes it easy to deal with data, find data, and understand the data. If I move across the columns, there are a number of columns on the other side of the data where we actually fill in details as we match against the SunSystems ledger. So currently, all of these lines are transparent or white. And this means that they are unmatched. They're still outstanding, they still need to be dealt with, and they need to be matched against the ledger data. And these columns over here are not filled in. And this is because these are columns that we fill in when we do a match against the system data. So you can see we have a match type, we have an auto-matching criteria, we have a date matched, a period, and an allocation reference that it would use when it allocates it against the SunSystems journal. So the allocation reference is because when we rec a bank statement line against a ledger line, what the system will do is actually place an R allocation marker against the SunSystems ledger data to say this has been reconciled. And that is what you would do in Sun if you were going to go off and do a manual bank reconciliation. So what it would actually do is create a new allocation reference which would have a sequential number associated to it, and that's SunSystems functionality. And BankRec replicates that when it does the allocation so that you can tell in Sun that a line has been reconciled by the system. So if we wanted to have a look at some data that's already been matched, if I go to one of these other statement pages, we'll find that on some of them there's a set of yellow data. So some of these lines are white, some of them are yellow. And the yellow lines indicate that it has been matched already against the SunSystems system and that the reconciliation is complete. So what you would expect is that over time all of your statements would appear fully in yellow as you go down, because only the outstanding ones will be in white. So this is a very visual representation of the fact it's been matched. But if we move across to the right here, you can see that this one was matched by manual matching. Someone actually forced a manual match. We got the date it was matched, the allocation reference, and the allocation period and date. Whereas this one here was an automatic match that was done by the system functionality. It used a certain matching rule, so you can tell which one you've used to do that match, and again it's allocated against Sun. So this is how we can look at history and understand what's occurred in the past. This in itself is quite good because we can tell the lines have been matched, but if we wanted to see the Sun line, in a normal sense we would need to go and find this allocation reference in the linked ledger bank account, and that would be painful and not what really we want to be able to do. So rather than that, what we can do is drill down into any of the yellow lines and see the history of the match. So if I double click on the yellow line, it will then bring up a separate form which allows us to see at the top the statement line that was involved and the statement data, and then at the bottom of the record it shows us the SunSystem line or lines that have been matched against it. So we can see that it's got a certain SunSystems transaction, and as we scroll across we can see the journal number, the journal line number, and that sort of detail. And if we wanted to drill any further, we can go down here and say show transaction, and it will then show us all the detail of that SunSystems journal line that's been matched against it. And in here we can see the journal type, the journal source, any analysis codes or T codes that have been entered, conversion, and other detail against the line. So it's a very good, strong systems database level audit within SunSystems that you can always rely on to go and have a look at the history of your matching. But of course, in some cases, mistakes do occur. So we need a way of easily unmatching things, untangling the matches we've already made so that we can go and then correctly allocate it if you've made a mistake. So what we can do is, if we don't think that is correct, we can say unmatch. It will ask us whether or not we're happy with that, and I am, and it will then remove the allocation marker from the Sun journal and remove the linkage to this line here in the statement and represent that line as now unmatched, ready for rematching. So from within the system, without having to go into Sun, we can always go and unmatch and untangle and then rematch, etc. So this makes it a very good, easy to use tool in terms of not having to use multiple systems in order to do that. And it's very quick and easy to do, just a click of a button. So that's our sort of viewing of the statement history. But obviously the key to this is the ability to do some new matching. So if I wanted to go and do matching, we have the do matching option, and it's obviously a very literal terminology, do matching. That's what it does. So we go into the outstanding by account number. This will then give me a list of the accounts where I have outstanding data either on the ledger side in Sun or the statement side that we've imported. And in this case, I'm going to go and have a look at my 88888 account, and we can see that we now get a split screen. And that split screen is actually designed to allow us to do manual matching between the two sides of the transaction. At the top of the screen, we have the bank statement lines that are currently in existence for this account that have not been matched against Sun. So this includes all statement pages, data that hasn't been matched all the way back from the beginning of setting up this account. If we were doing regular bank recs and dealing with all the data quickly, you wouldn't expect there to be many lines beyond that which you've just imported on a daily or weekly basis. Down at the bottom, we have the same situation, but for the SunSystems linked ledger bank account. So this shows all journal lines in that bank account that haven't been allocated off against a statement and potentially then need to be matched going forward. The functionality in the grid is exactly the same. So if I wanted to move any of these columns around, I can do so. If I wanted to sort, I can do so, and I can also group. So if I wanted to group by reference at the top, that's perfectly feasible, so I can see all my bank fees there, for example. Down at the bottom, in the Sun journal, we can see all of the SunSystems journal type fields. So everything you would normally expect to see on the journal line, including all of the ledger analysis detail, the entry periods, the currency situation, etc., etc. So all of those fields that you would expect to see from SunSystems, no matter what version of SunSystems you're using. So this is quite useful because being able to find a line, technically it may be a case of just looking through the data at the top, highlighting a line, and then looking through the data at the bottom and highlighting a line. And if this balances out, so we actually have 8,000 here and 8,000 here, you'll see down the bottom that we have a balancing calculation, and that would need to balance to 0 in order to make it a good match, one that I could actually carry out. We don't have to have a one-to-one match. We can actually use the Control and Shift keys on the keyboard to enable us to do many at the top, many at the bottom. Doesn't matter what we do as long as it balances to 0 so that we're able to then make an allocation match between the two. If you're looking at this data, sometimes people want to be able to segregate by things such as period or maybe ledger analysis, and that's where the grouping is quite useful. So if we look here, I've got a number of different analysis codes that could be relevant to this. So potentially I could say, let's have a look at department, group it by department, and that could then be used as part of my grouping against reference. So I can identify transactions easily and understand what's going on with them and work through sets of transactions based on my knowledge of the referencing and the way it adds up. With this matching functionality, if we now go and find a transaction in the statement that potentially I could match, I've got some here for 60,000. Down at the bottom, I can then go and find a relevant transaction with the same amount. Hopefully I've got one for 60,000 here. There we go. You can see this now comes to 0. So to perform the match, all I need to do is go match, click the button in the middle of the screen. It will then disappear from here. And the second I do that, it's now posted the R allocation marker into the SunSystems ledger. It's moved these journal lines into my history area that we were looking at before, where they'll appear as yellow lines and have the allocation reference and all the history there. So I've now, in effect, performed a match against the statement, and I could have done that with one or many lines. Other functionality that can be useful is the ability to split SunSystems journal lines. We don't split the statement. The system doesn't manipulate the statement data in any way, but it does allow us to split Sun journals. So for an example, if we look up here, I've got a statement line that was potentially a smaller amount. So if I have a look, we've got one here for £138. Down at the bottom, if I find a bigger amount, my 60,000 amount, what I wanted to do is take 138 of that amount and allocate it against that and leave the remaining amount here for future use. So by right-clicking on the Sun line, I can say split transaction, which will then give me a split function, where I can type in the amount I want to split off, which in this case is £138. And I can then fill in any changes to the details. So if I wanted to change my description, maybe I wanted to say split or part fund or whatever it is I wanted to do there, because that's going to be a new journal line in Sun. I can then balance it out. So save that line, add a balancing line. It gives me my balancing amount here, although there is a hotkey function for balancing as well if you wanted to use that, where it automatically fills in the balancing amount. And what we have is a situation where you can fill in as many splits as you needed in order to get this down to 0. So I could take 20 different splits and then leave a balancing amount if needed. When I do this, it will then split the line in Sun, leave the remainder here for me to deal with at a different point in time. And there's my split one, split fund transfer for 138. I can now match that against my 138 from the top, and I'm then able to proceed with my allocation, leaving the remainder undone. And what that does is exactly the same as allocation does in SunSystems, where you use that split function within Sun. It adds an extra journal line into the journal with a line number of 999999. So BankRec is following exactly the function you would expect to see as a result of doing something within SunSystems. On the other side of this equation, we have the posting of transactions into Sun as a journal directly from the statement. So if we go and do our balancing our grouping again, I can find my bank fees. Typically, this is something I may want to post into Sun that haven't already appeared in the ledger from another feed. So what I could do is highlight one of the lines, or indeed all of the lines, right-click and say Create Journal. And when I do this, it will then show me a blank journal preset option where I can fill in the detail, or maybe in the background, as part of the config of BankRec, I've set up a preset journal type for the purposes of posting different things into the ledger. So in this case, I've got one called bank charge, one called receipt. If I choose the bank charge option, this will then bring up a journal form. And what this allows us to do is to post a two-line journal. And the two-line journal has a line that's posted to the linked ledger bank account. So the bank preset here will go to 52200, which is my account in Sun that I've linked this statement to. We've got the transaction date, which obviously I can choose, or it will take the date from today. And I can fill in the references within my preset here. So in this case, I've set the preset to have a reference and description of bank charge. Or I could have actually set this up so that it took the reference and description from the statement data. So if the bank charge in the statement says bank charge 2nd of February 2014 or whatever, then if I'd chosen that option, it would actually populate it into the description and reference from the statement when I do that. Down below, I can alter any of my ledger analysis that may be needed. So this is T-codes, ledger analysis within Sun. and the other side of the journal would go to whichever account I'm wanting to update as a result of this posting. So for me, that's my bank charges account. I can look at all the accounts in Sun and make a choice if I wanted to, but I've got this preset set up to look at 38100, which was my bank charges account. And I've chosen that it will post it with a particular journal type, which in this case is a general journal, but I could have done bank charges or whatever other journal types I've got available within my SunSystems business unit by selecting from the list here. When I'm ready to go, and in normal cases that will be immediately because I don't need to post make any selections, I can say OK, and the system goes off, posts a journal into Sun, returns the journal number to me, so it's now created a journal for the right amount in the Sun ledger, and then it will allocate that directly to my bank charge in the statement, and they will disappear from the screen. So that would now appear as yellow in my history list, and I've performed that rec. So you can see that's quite a quick way of dealing with things that weren't already in Sun, need to be posted off, and over time you can build as many journal type presets as you need for that sort of posting, and receipt potentially could be a nice one, receipts for different types of things, stuff like this. The other thing we may want to do is post a balancing transaction. So if we potentially had £10 in the statement and £10 in Sun, maybe it was £10 and 1 pence. Maybe there was a balancing error, maybe a rounding error, something like that. So what I want to do is allocate the lines together, but I want to post off a journal into Sun for my unrealized balance, which in this case is going to be a large amount, but in normal cases you would want to keep it a low amount. So if I wanted to do that, I can say right click, generate balance, choose my approved small balance preset, and when I choose this, it would then post off the differences between the two as a journal, allocated as part of the allocation, and of course the other side of the journal would go wherever I wanted it to go as part of my preset. So that's another interesting piece of functionality that makes things quick and easy within the system. So this is manual matching. I could proceed to do manual matching to do all of my recking if I wanted to. Don't have to use automatic matching, but the real key is the ability to automate, the ability to do automatic matching and do it at a high speed and improve your efficiency. So what we may want to do is actually use the right-click function here on an account to say run automatic matching. And when we do that, it will apply rules that we've built that could either be specific to this particular account or they could be general rules that apply to all accounts in order to identify as many things as possible, remove them from the screen, and then leave only those that are unmatched during automation for you to perform manual matching against. So that's one way of doing it. So if I do automatic matching, on this it probably won't find that many actually, but it is very quick and it's actually gone through and removed a few transactions there. Can't tell because I had a lot, but the point is it would have performed that match and created them in yellow. So to set up these automatic matching rules, what we need to do is up here go and look at the automatic matching setup function. So we actually have two components to an automatic matching rule. The first is a criteria and the second is a rule. And the criteria is where we define how we're going to identify things in the statement. And you can have as many different rules set up as you like. So if I go plus, I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to call this webinar match. So it's just something to identify what this criteria is all about, what it's trying to identify in the statement. So typically you may have things such as bank charge or credit or direct debit or whatever you feel is appropriate for you to understand the rule. We then go across and we can either make it specific to a certain bank account we have set up in the system, or by leaving it blank it will be a generic criteria. But most importantly, over on the right hand side here we have a number of different fields that come from the statement. So we could say that we're looking for debits or credits in the statement, or by leaving it blank it would be either a debit or a credit. We could choose to go for certain date ranges or value date ranges, but the most important fields are these three here, the transaction type, the reference and the description, because that's typically where you would identify a match in the statement. So if we wanted to find something that we knew precisely what it was we were looking for, we can very easily type in here exactly what it is. So for example, if we knew the description in the statement was always going to be webinar, then if I type webinar in here in uppercase, when the rule is applied, it will look through the statement data to find all transactions that have webinar in a description field in uppercase. If I put it as web in lowercase, it would also apply that. So it is case sensitive. It will look precisely for what you're saying there. Now, if it was as easy as that, it would be great. But it's not always that easy, because transactions, references, and descriptions that come through, quite often we know a proportion of what may be there, but we don't know all of it. And we may even not know the order that things will appear. So we perhaps know that it will have the words bank charge, but we perhaps don't know whether it will have a number in front of it or a number after it, or maybe we know it will have the letters ALR somewhere, but we don't know where or how that will appear. So what we do is provide wildcard matching. And those wildcards can be used in a number of different ways. So for an example, if I put ABC, we know that it would look for ABC in uppercase. But if I knew then that that was followed by 2 blank characters, I could put hyphen hyphen, and that would mean it would look for ABC followed by 2 blank characters. If I knew it then had 789, fine, I can do that. But potentially I don't know what the last characters are. Perhaps it's 1 character, maybe there are no characters, maybe the 20 characters. It's up to the bank. So I could use a percentage marker, and that means any number of characters of any type. So it would now look for ABC in uppercase, followed by a couple of blanks, followed by 789, followed by anything at all. So you can see how we could build quite an interesting set of strings here. We also have a wildcard for underscore, and that is a single character of any type. So I could actually look for something where I didn't know what the first character was, so I put underscore. Then I had the number 1, 2, 3. Then any number of characters of any type, followed by ABC at the end, that sort of thing. So you have to think about how you configure these rules, and most of the time they tend to be organic. You start with a few that are very obvious and very generic, but over time, in looking at the statements, in dealing with the data, people become aware of references that perhaps are more common or things I could identify, and then start to think about how we could build rules related to that to identify them. And this wildcard function goes for the transaction type, the reference, and the description. So we could have things in this field, that field, and this field. So maybe it says backs as a transaction type, that sort of thing. And we can build as many as we like. But once we've identified the transactions in the statement, we then need to say, how do we match these to the SunSystems data? So over in this field, we have a matching rule. And the matching rule you apply dictates how it's going to match against the SunSystems data. So we need to decide on a matching rule. And if I hit the drop down, we've got a number of rules that have been set up historically here. But I may go and just create a new one. So we go into the matching rule tab, we go new, and I'm going to create a new matching rule, and I'm going to call it webinar 1. So that matching rule will be used for potentially finding transactions that said webinar and dealing with them. And in the system, we have the option to either match against existing Sun transactions as part of a rule, or we can go and create new transactions in Sun. So in the same way as we've just done with the manual matching function, where we posted a journal, the matching rules can also post journals. So if we've identified a bank charge, for example, using our criteria, we can link it to a matching rule that was set to create a SunSystems journal, and we could decide to use the preset that we've already looked at to post a journal into Sun for those. So we can do this auto-posting as well as auto-matching from within a matching rule. In this case, I'm going to match to existing Sun transactions. So we look at this. On the left-hand side, we are dealing with statement data, whereas on the right-hand side, we're dealing with SunSystems ledger data. So I can decide which fields I want to match against. So I could say that the date in the statement potentially needs to match the transaction date, the entry date, or the posting date in Sun. We could potentially say that the reference in the statement needs to match against the journal type in Sun, or the transaction reference, which would be more typical, or description, or even maybe use a T-code. Maybe the reference has some relevance to a T-code that you're holding in Sun, such as a department or something like that. When we do this match, these are cumulative, so they all need to apply. So if I clicked all of them, then it would need to match on all of these bases. But most people tend to go with reference, I would say, or description as the main ones. With this matching, we can strip leading zeros from the data, and that's a common one with check numbers, where maybe at the bank it doesn't have a leading zero, whereas in Sun potentially it does, or vice versa. So that's a standard functionality. But what's more interesting is this ability to take partial elements of the reference or the description. So the reference in the statement, maybe the first 2 characters are irrelevant, but the second character, running for 3, are saying my department code. Over here, maybe I'm going to take the transaction reference in Sun and say it's the 5th character running for 3 that would represent that coding structure. Or maybe it's just going to match against my T0 code, and it would be all characters would be my department code, or whatever would be relevant. So by using the combination of the characters with the wildcards in the criteria and the string matching here, and indeed the choices of fields, we can build up something that does make sense as long as we have this level of commonality in the background. In terms of the general options we can match either against a one-to-one system, whereby if there's more than one possible match, then it won't do anything. Or we could even match oldest or earliest, and this is quite good where you have repeating transactions of the same amount with the same references, that sort of thing. So if there was a rental amount coming in, it always had the same reference and it came in once a month, you could actually say match oldest first. So it would take the oldest in the ledger and match it against the first possible match it found, but the oldest one in the statement. So it would chronologically work forward, or we could chronologically work backwards if that was what you wanted to do. We can also do tolerance, and tolerance matches mean that we can apply an amount or a percentage tolerance, or both, to the match. So we can say that if there's a perfect match formed based on referencing, the amount needs to be within a certain percentage or amount tolerance, and if it is within that amount, we regard it as a proper match, and if it is then properly matched, we want to post off the difference using our small and approved balance preset, or whatever the journal type is that you've set up for that. So there are a number of options here to deal with those slightly more awkward combinations of things where you know that it will be within a range, but not quite within that range, as well as the ability to deal with more than one transaction with the same referencing and amount. So once we've set up these rules, they're then easy to manage because you can come in here and change them as often as you like. You can also use the same matching rule against multiple criteria, so that makes it nice and simple if you've got things that are repetitive across accounts and stuff like that. And we then have them sitting there, and they are those that get applied when we go and do our auto-matching run and remove transactions from here by doing so. So once we've done an auto-matching run, the view statement function will then reflect that. So if I go back in and have a look at an account that we were matching against, we will see automatic. So it's saying it's an automatic match. This is the rule and the criteria that it's actually used to do that posting for me. In this case, it's used all the same rule. So this is where the real benefit, real speed occurs within the system. The final area we should look at is reporting. And the first part of reporting is actually being able to keep a track of things you can't match. So if we go back into do matching, have a look at an account, one area we didn't examine is when I click on the statement line or on a Sun line, what happens is we get an extra tab appearing. So if I've got a recalcitrant transaction that I need to actually make some notes on, I can go to the statement note area, add a new note, and say, can't find the match, we'll try next month, or whatever it is that I want to say, and we can then date timestamp that and keep it by that user against this transaction, and later I could come in and add another note. So we can start build up a history of actions and details that we've taken against that particular transaction. And the same thing goes on the transaction notes on the SunSystems side. So if you can't match something in Sun, you could go and say amount wrong or whatever it would be. So I know I need to go and deal with those at a different time in the background. And once I've added a note, we can see that we get a bold title on the statement notes tab. So when I click on it, we can see there's a statement note, and also it will show us the number of notes in this note count column here in the background. So that's the first stage of sort of reporting, the ability to add notes and understand what's going on. The area that's more important, however, is the report function. And this is where we can generate BankRec reports on demand from the system, and there are a number of different reports that you can use. The first one is a standard bank reconciliation report, and I can run this for a particular business unit if I wish to. in Sun. I can run it for either an individual or a range of accounts within the system. I'm going to just run it for this one. And we can also run this on a period basis. So this is something unique to the system, the ability to choose the period of your statement report and do a retrospective report for closed periods if you needed to. And that is because in the background, we actually maintain a period-to-date mapping. So when we set up BankRec, you can configure date ranges that comply to SunSystems periods. And that means that when we run a report, the system can work out which data in the statement, which doesn't technically have a period associated to it, would be appearing in a report run off for that period. So if the date falls later than the period that you run the report for, it knows to move that statement data, even if it's in the system, into the unreconciled category, so it's futures. So this is how we can do retrospective statement reporting. There are actually default reports that come with the system. So this one is a report layout for a standard, but we can build as many as you like in here as part of the setup if needed, but I'm going to run off this standard one. And this will show me some key data. First of all, which account it's for, what currency, which business unit. It would show me the period and the bank closing balance that was relevant to that. Below here, we then see the ledger balance at that point. And then it breaks down all of the unmatched ledger transactions that have not yet been reconciled in the ledger up to that period. So you can see it does it by journal type typically. And I can go through those just by scrolling down on the page. And once it gets through all of the ledger transactions, if I go to the next page, you'll see that it then starts to show my statement transactions. So we're still on ledger. Here it's moving across from the ledger transactions into my unmatched bank statement transactions. And then finally, at the bottom of the report, it will then take me to the reconciliation position, and it shows my ledger balance, my unmatched statement amount, the ledger amount, calculated balance, calculated difference, etc., which are pretty standard forms of calculation that you apply with a BankRec report. In a normal sense, your calculated difference should be 0 between these two, but for my demonstration environment, I'm using repetitive statement data, so it is out of balance by that amount. So that would not be the normal case in an environment that was running in a live situation. So that's just one type of report. We go back up to the top. We can export any of these reports into PDF, into Microsoft Excel, into Word. We can send it to a web page, an HTML file, or print it off, or even email it directly from the system to somebody if you wanted to. So this is standard reporting distribution functionality from within here. If I close that report, we then have something such as a summary report. This gives us the same sort of information, but breaks it down in a summary form across the page, and it's good for looking at multiple accounts. So if I run this one here, you'll see that it gives me the same sort of data, but in a summary format. So the statement debit, statement balance, open balance, etc. This one's not quite nice for taking out to Excel if you wanted to. The other side of it is a statement report. And in the statement report, we can actually decide whether or not we want to see only transactions that have been matched or only those unmatched, depending on what's important to us, and we can choose statement date ranges. I'm going to say show everything, and when we run this off, you'll see that it's showing me transactions on my statement for this account. I'm looking at all statement lines, and we can see that these transactions are all unmatched. They have a U, meaning they haven't yet been matched against a SunSystems transaction. As we go down, we can see it also shows any statement notes that we've added. So these are the 2 notes I added against that statement line in the background. And then moving on, it will then show any that have been matched. So this statement line has been matched against a Sun line, hence the end marker, and it shows me the journal that was detailed for that. So that's journal 928, line 1, period, amount, etc. So this is a very good summary report that we can deal with in terms of looking at the data and understanding what needs to be done with it, but also for reporting and audit purposes as well. And of course, I could have decided to not show matched reports in the background here. So that's the sort of reporting you can get from the system. Generally, people find that reporting is good, but there is also a capability to report, obviously, from Sun on reconciled transactions in Sun that have R markers on them. And within here, you could also look at the database tables to report on the bank rec detail with any reporting tool that could look at a database reporting element if needed. So that really is a summary of the bank rec functionality. It is a tool that's easy to deploy. Normally there's a small planning session. We will be able to generally get bank rec for a sort of moderate number of accounts up and running in a couple of days worth of effort with some training and deployment. So it's not a large system to deploy. And really it all comes down to how many accounts there are, how many auto-matching rules you need to set up, and quite often that's something that organizations take on themselves. And indeed, more importantly, the cleanliness of the current bank rec. So if you've got a nice position, you know what's been recced off, etc., it does mean then it's easy to deploy because we can work out the statement balances easily when we get them into the system. So as a final flourish, on the do matching screen, one thing that people quite like sometimes is the ability to not work up and down, but rather work left and right. And that is something else that we can provide within here. So that brings me to the end of this session on bank rec. Hopefully it was of interest to you and provided enough information for you to see the benefits. And before we close off, I'll just throw the session open for any questions people may have. No? Okay, I'll take that then as no questions. If anyone does come up with anything they'd like to ask at a later date, please feel free to pass any queries through your account manager, and I'd be happy to answer those questions. So thank you very much for your time this afternoon, and I hope you have a great day.